Welcome to the Moffitt Method Podcast, where longtime strength and conditioning coach Tommy Moffitt explores everything from the art of coaching, improving performance, sports nutrition, and mental training. Now, welcome your host, Coach Tommy Moffitt.
Welcome to the Moffitt Method Podcast, and I am your host, Tommy Moffitt. If you're listening for the first time, please take a moment to subscribe to the podcast and share it with your friends. For more information about the Moffitt Method Speed, Strength, and Conditioning Program, please visit our website, themoffittmethod.fit, or email us at info@themoffittmethod.fit. Our incredible guest today is Coach Tommy Stucky. Coach Stucky enters his sixth year as Director of Sports Performance for Life University in Marietta, Georgia. He brings with him a wealth of knowledge with more than 25 years in the strength and conditioning field and 10 at the collegiate level. Coach Stucky oversees 20 sports and over 500 athletes with the help of one assistant. He is personally responsible for men's and women's wrestling, men's and women's soccer, basketball, men's and women's basketball, men's and women's volleyball, women's lacrosse, and cheer. Prior to coming to Life University, Coach Stucky spent 15 years as a high school coach in the Atlanta area at Meadowcreek High School in Lovett. In his time as a collegiate strength coach, he coached at the University of Tennessee, Oklahoma State University, and Auburn University. Coach Stucky has also had the privilege to work with some elite professional athletes, including Peyton Manning, Desmond Mason, Jonathan Schuler-Holtz, and Charles Howard III. Coach Stucky is certified through the CSCCA, CSAC, and USA Weightlifting. Coach lives in Marietta with his wife, Tiffany. They have 4 children, Carrington Schuler, Ashton, Thomas Jr., and Corinne. Welcome to the podcast, Coach.
It's my pleasure, Tommy Moffitt. Thank you for thinking of me to be on. I'm excited.
Yeah, thank you a lot. Like I told you before we went on, my goal is to have everyone that I've worked with on the podcast. It's just so much fun going back and talking old times before we record, and I'm sure we'll probably tell a story or two.
I'm sure.
And so I appreciate you doing this. So let's get to it. So first question out of the gate is, how did you get started in the field of strength and conditioning?
Well, that really goes back to my late great uncle John Stucky. You know him well as being at Tennessee. It was around my junior year at Kansas State. I didn't really know what career path I wanted to take. I just knew I didn't want to wear a suit. I wanted to kind of be on my feet. I enjoyed working out. I enjoyed athletics. And I remember my dad came downstairs in my room and said, I just got off the phone with your uncle. He said, hey, if you don't know what you want to do, think about strength conditioning. I said, okay. He said, but you need to try to get an internship somewhere. So I just happened to be lucky enough that my first great mentor, Rod Cole at Kansas State, was looking for internships. And I went down there and he interviewed me, and I got the job, and it was just smooth sailing from there. I loved the atmosphere, loved working with the athletes, and it was my first, to see a weight room of that size, which back then was big. Now we know they're Taj Mahals. I really enjoyed just the camaraderie, the competitiveness, and that's really what led me to fall in love with the field.
Yeah. So for those that don't know who his uncle is, we were just talking about Coach Stucky and his son, Philip, but Coach Stucky was the head strength coach at the University of Tennessee he's the person that gave me my first job in college coaching, but he had stints at the University of Arkansas, North Carolina State. I know he coached defensive line at one time at Wichita State.
Yeah.
The CSCCA has a scholarship that they give each year, I think, in his name. Don Decker, who we all know Don Decker with the CSCCA, was an assistant. Coach Paul Mary was an assistant. Who else am I leaving? I think that's it. But he was great friends with Al Miller, Al Vermeil, Johnny Parker. He's from that era, and just we had so much fun working for him. So that is Tommy's uncle that he speaks of. So
It's funny that I still get when I go to the conference, they'll have some young strength coach go up, "Hey, I read about your dad, and it's phenomenal." I said, "It's actually my uncle, but I appreciate it."
oh, and he was and we were talking about his son Philip being built like him now, but when Philip was young. Philip was probably 12, 14 years old when I was there. He probably weighed $145, but Tommy tells me he's built like a mountain of a man now. But his father, John, was built like a gorilla. I mean, his back was so wide, and he was a piece of work. He was a great
Sure
guy
was.
to work for, man.
He was.
Hard worker too. Hard worker.
Yeah.
All right. So, so now let's talk about your uncle and some of the other people that you've worked for. You've worked for a lot of really good coaches, as a young intern, as a grad assistant, and then in your collegiate career before you left the collegiate coaching. So can you talk about some of the great mentors that you had when you were young?
Hey, yes, like I said, Rod Cole was my very first mentor, and just in the year and a half I was there, I learned a tremendous amount just about discipline, dedication, kind of what it takes on the surface to be a strength coach. Back in those days as interns, you did more than just make shakes or check inventory. You helped print out at that time Woodstock, or not paper, but that card stock for workouts.
Yeah, card stock for workout.
And he gave me responsibilities like set up the indoor facility for the football team, which was a big deal with Coach Snyder because he was very anal. Yeah. And I will tell one story, which there's many, that was quite comical. I remember the first time I set it up, the indoor facility, Coach Cole asked me, "Please get there early enough that you set correctly on the draw. I'm going to draw it out how Coach Snyder wants." I said, "Yes, sir." I got there like an hour and a half early, and I went over, it must be 20 times to make sure at every station. It had to be 16 stations. I mean, I was nervous. Yeah. So the team starts rolling in, and Coach Snyder walks by. He's in his suit, and he's like, "Tommy?" I said, "Yes, sir." He's like, "There's 16 stations." I said, "Yes, there is." And so I counted, like, "Yes, sir, right here, 16. He's like, "I count 15. I said, No, sir, I'll count right here again. And I even counted, I go, "There's 16. He goes, "I counted 15. I said, "Yes, sir." And then I looked over at Coach Cole. He's like, look at me like, just do what he wants you to do. So I just set up another pro agility drill right next to him. I go, "Yes, sir. Here's number 16. I was like, "It's really number 17. He's like, "Thank you." It's like, so I was like, "Is he messing with me? What's going on?" But that's how Coach Snyder was just testing me, I guess.
Oh, that's funny. That's that's probably happened to all of us at one time or another.
I'm sure. But yeah, like you said, mentors, I've been blessed. I was thinking about that last night, from Rod Cole and moving on to Dan Austin, who's elite of elite in powerlifting. Even today, he's breaking records at the senior level, master's level. And then, of course, let's back up a little bit and give due props to our staff at Tennessee. I mean, from John to you, I mean, I still have workouts and stuff. Most of my philosophy was basically I inherited from you my beliefs in what we do. And I forever be thankful to you, Big Tony Ollison. And, our GAs, if you look at grad assistants and how successful they are now, I mean, Johnny Long, Rob Phillips, Lance Sewell, Nate Hooks, and then you throw in Jason Elka. I mean, I was just thrown there just to learn from those guys. And that's kind of why I stayed another, I think, 6 months to try to absorb as much information, because God, those guys were smart. And we had a wonderful staff.
Noel Durfee was there too.
That's right. Yeah. Noel was in there. Noel's another one. And I mean, just phenomenal strength coaches, been successful wherever they've been. It's really amazing to think back at all the knowledge that I was blessed to be part of.
And the athletes that we got to coach.
To this day, people ask me, "What's your best teams?" I said, it's a toss-up. I said, those Peyton Manning years, 95 through 97, are tough to beat, because we had so many phenomenal athletes on both sides of the ball. And then me and Yox will talk about the 2003-4 team was really good at Auburn as well with those athletes. So it's been an amazing ride, and I forever indebted to all the coaches, and Coach Yox again. I'm close to him. He's selling stuff for Dynamic Fitness, and he got, each stop, I think each strength coach, you learn something, and you want to store it. And then, this is something when you have a chance to become your own head position that you can use. You just try to take as many mental notes as you can, like, those are such great things to do. And it's just phenomenal. And I could go down a list and name all my great assistants, to the one I have now, to in high school, to all my stops. It's been in GAs. It's been amazing. I've just been blessed.
Great. When you think about all those coaches that you work for, like especially a guy like Dan Austin, who, people say weightlifting's bad for you, and he's still setting records at his age, and is going strong. And Coach Yox is the same person. Every time you meet him, he is still the same Coach Yoxall that I've known my entire career.
He is so genuine. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, we used to eat at Gibbs Hall. So I would talk about Coach Stucky's plates, but I can't. We're not even going to talk about that. But do you remember seeing Coach Summit in the cafeteria at Gibbs Hall? So one day, to walk in Gibbs Hall, and I don't know where she was coming from. She'd probably parked her car, but to walk into the dining area, the football facility was right across the street from where the dining hall was, where all the coaches and all the athletes were eating. And so one day I'm walking into the cafeteria for lunch, and I see her coming, and I didn't want to cut her off because I was scared of her.
Yeah.
So I slowed down to let her go in front of me. And then I went to go, step up on the steps to follow her up the steps. And I tripped and fell.
Oh, man.
And she turned around. And the last thing I wanted to do is embarrass myself in front of Coach Summit.
That's right.
And she turned around and she said, "Coach, are you okay?" I said, "Yes, ma'am, I'm fine." And she reached down and helped me up. It was crazy, man. I was so intimidated by that woman.
She, I got to work with her. I got to assist, Tony, Big T in basketball. And she spoke in one of my classes for a master's program.
Yeah.
And I was in the background. I had a Tennessee hat on. And the first thing she said, "Mr. Stucky, we don't have hats in this building." I mean, I ripped that thing off. I was so embarrassed. She called me out in front of the class. I said, "Yes, ma'am. You're right. Yes, ma'am." She goes, "You don't do that." I said, "Yes, ma'am." I was like, "Oh God, I don't want to make her mad."
Yeah. Yeah. Didn't want to make her mad.
No.
All right. Can you talk about the transition from being a GA at Tennessee to becoming a full-time coach at Oklahoma State, back in the old days in the 90s?
I tell you, it was kind of a shock and awe for me because, at Tennessee as GAs, our main sport is assisting football. And then I helped out a little bit with basketball and I had swimming. But at Oklahoma State, on my interview, I'll never forget, I'm dressed in a suit and tie and football's in there working out in the weight room. Coach Austin goes, "You mind go over there and work with that group?" I said, "Excuse me, sir?" He said, "Yes, can you go over there and work with them?" I said, "Yes, sir, what do you want to do?" He's like, "Just coach them up." I said, "Yes, sir, I'll do that." So he threw me in the fire right away. I'm spotting guys without my pants don't rip. And it was because at that time it was Dan and myself, and then we had 2 GAs with all the sports. And so I inherited men's wrestling, and back in the 90s, they were really a powerhouse. I inherited men's basketball.
Was John Smith the coach? Yeah.
He's still there.
Yeah.
He's bad.
Badass.
He's a badass dude. And I had both basketball programs, baseball and softball plus football. Wow. So my head was spinning. And I think the biggest adjustment for me going from Tennessee to Oklahoma State, besides the fact of the knowledge, all the thing, worked different sports, was as my first time working really with female athletes. And so my language I had to learn, and it took me probably a couple of weeks because my gruffness I had to change because I didn't understand why I couldn't get the response I needed. They just wouldn't. They'd shut down. And I had one young basketball player tell me that I was an a-hole. She's like, "We don't respect you because you're mean. You don't care about us." I said, "That's not true. I'm just trying to make you work hard." But I didn't see that you have to talk different to men and women. I learned that lesson because a lot of my sports were women. And so once I changed and learned how to coach both sides, as you know, women are great athletes because they want to please you as a strength coach, and so they're phenomenal to work for. And it was I loved all my sports there. I fell in love with the place. It was really awesome. And Coach Austin was great. He gave me so much autonomy in what to do, and he even had me help write football percentages for in season, as season. I just got hired from a gym. Like, I'm not sure what to do exactly. He's like, and he'd come back and just have it marked out red. Nope, do it again. I'm just like, yes, sir.
So you had 6 sports?
I did.
Wow. Yeah, those are 2 separate departments now. I mean, you have 5 just for football, and
their weight rooms are unreal, both Olympic and everything. So it was, and that weight room was designed by John. He was there.
That's right.
And our
That's
platform
right. He was at Oklahoma State also. I forgot about that.
Yeah, in the late 80s with Barry Sanders. And so that weight room was designed by him. So it was pretty cool. Dan and John had known each other, and that's kind of how I got the call to go there.
Wow. I forgot all about that. And so Garth Brooks was a javelin thrower, and then he wanted to be a strength coach. So Coach Stucky said that after his throwing career was over, he would come in the weight room and help and sweep the floor at night. That was the last thing that Garth would do before he left, would sweep the weight room floor. And I think he did that just so Coach would let him work out in the weight room. Mm-hmm. That's amazing.
Crazy. That is amazing.
And, Coach Stucky also, I forgot about this. I mentioned Don Decker, but Don was his assistant at Arkansas. So when Coach Stucky left to come to Tennessee, I think Coach Decker got the head coaching job at Arkansas after Coach Stucky left.
And this as well as I do. His son Philip was named after Phil Fulmer because they both coached at Wichita State together.
Yes,
they're really tight, really close, but friends.
That is correct. And Coach Fulmer's son is named John. So Coach Fulmer and Coach Stucky both named their sons after one another, and they were the best man, I think, in each other's wedding. And they had met at Wichita State. That is correct.
That's right.
Amazing.
I know.
So over the years, you touched on how you had to change. How has that your coaching style continued to evolve over the years?
I think the one thing I've done, Tommy, probably the last, I'd say 10 or so years is I try to be more, and not saying that, let me preface by saying I didn't care, but I think I try to empathize the student athletes first. Like I'll try to put myself in their shoes before I jump on. Like, for example, and I'll just use life now. If a kid's running late by 2 minutes, there'll be some little punishment, but I'm just not going to berate him in front of the team. I'll say, hey, can you tell me how I'm coach? I was driving. I got pulled over, or I hit a rock and I had to get changed, whatever it may be. And they'll say, okay, next time, try to get a hold of me earlier, or leave earlier. I'll try to educate them as well. Maybe you have to get up earlier because of Atlanta traffic.
Right.
And so, and I'm not saying right, wrong, or different. In the old days, my coaching was, okay, we've got to work hard. And if these kids aren't looking like they're dead tired, then I failed as a strength coach, right. Because I was young and learning. I wasn't sure what you kind of learn by trial and error. And a lot of times I look back like, man, I'm not sure that was probably the best way to handle it. And just from how you speak to them, the respect piece, I don't know that, I respect him, but a lot of times they're probably like, well, he probably doesn't really like me as much as I respect him just because of the way he's talking to me. Tone, everything is big, and especially when you're dealing with female athletes. So I've really tried to be more empathetic towards them, still pushing, working, but try to be more understanding. And I think that's helped because, you've told me this a long time ago, and it always stuck with me. I don't know if you remember this when we were GAs, when I was a GA and you're working at Tennessee, when we had football groups, I seemed to get kind of the tougher athletes, if you will, the guys that wouldn't really listen, or it's hard to crack, maybe weren't real vocal. You couldn't read them real well.
Right.
And I remember coming up to you one day, I said, golly, Coach Moffitt said, these guys, how come like Noel and Rob get these, like paying those guys? I have to get this guy. And you said, Tommy, and I'll never forget this. You said, a great strength coach isn't so much about what you know. You go, I can get a book and open it up and I can write program, design it and do this for condition, do work rest intervals, all that stuff. He said, what makes a great strength coach is the ability to motivate. And you told me that. You said, I see that in you, and that's where we put those kids with you, not only for a test, but because we know that you can get through with them. And that has stuck with me for 30 years. And I always remember that, and I think that's the key, is the ability to motivate in circumstances and the situation you're in. And so I always try to find the right buttons, because, you have different kids, different backgrounds. You can't talk to them the same way,
That's
especially
right.
now. And so to me, that's the biggest learning curve for me, is I've tried to put myself in their shoes just for a second and say, well, calm down. Let's not get upset. Let's talk to them like a human, like a man, respect, because that's what you want in return. I think for me, that has made a world of difference in my coaching style, like on the floor and stuff.
Grant Taft, the great Baylor head football coach, they won the Southwest Conference. Baylor was they called it the Little Baptist College, and he won the Southwest Conference when Arkansas and A&M and Texas and Oklahoma and everybody was there. And he was the president of the American Football Coaches Association. So when I first started coaching, Tommy, my boss at John Curtis, JT, gave me a book. He said, here, you need to read this book. And it was a green book. It was Baylor green. And the title of the book was called I Believe by Grant Taft. And in that book, he talked about the same thing that you're talking about now. And it's where I got that from. And it was, every player is different. Every player is motivated for different reasons. And he called it their button. And he said, you've got to find every player's button and use that as motivation. And it's different for everyone.
Sure.
It's to get out of their neighborhood, or to earn a degree, or to go to the next level, or, put food on the table, whatever it is. Now it's different today, because a lot of times, I used to tell our young assistant coaches, a lot of it's written on their arms, in the form of tattoos.
That's right.
So it's a lot easier now, because they put all their feelings on their sleeves, and most of the time. So it's a lot easier than it used to be. But yeah, we had some tough nuts there to crack. We really did. We had some wild horse riders now. We had some wild horse riders. So yeah, I'm sorry about that. But yeah, by the way.
No, that's good. It helped me. It helped me. So, and when you said that, it made me feel, kind of important, because, when John called me, and Coach Cole pushed me to go to Tennessee as a GA, he said, I think you need to go out and see another part of the country. I said, okay, that's great. He goes, you're going to love it. It's going to be different. It's SEC football. It's going to be wild. But, John, when he told me I'm bringing you in, he said, understand, I'm going to ride you more than the other GAs because you're blood. And I don't want any of them to think that it's favoritism. I want it to be opposite. Yeah. So if there's extra work to do, you just do it because that's what you're going to do. And I said, yes, sir, I understand.
Well, he was a tough boss too, man. Whew. He was a tough boss. He got the best out of you. I know that. And I owe the world to him. For one, giving me the opportunity. I was just a high school coach, and he could have hired 100 people. In fact, he told me, he opened his desk drawer and said, you see all these resumes? I could have hired every one of those guys besides you. Said, yes, sir. Oh, shoot. So what do you think is the biggest key in being a successful strength coach? Like, of all the things that, we come in contact with, what do you think is probably one of the most important things about, being successful in this business?
Yeah, I think it's, well, to me, and people may be different, I think the first thing you need to do is kind of check your ego at the door. All right. I think you also need to know that when the weight room is filled up with student athletes, that's always your first priority. One thing that I never would do, and I see a lot of young strength coaches doing it, I'm not saying it's right, wrong, or different, but you won't ever catch me working out during a group, or even if it's a small group where kids, a time where student athletes come in. I get up at 3:45 every morning. I work out at 4 to 5:15 or 5:20 because I usually have groups at 6 a.m. And I just make sure that's my time is my time. I don't need to be doing it on their time. They come first. So I think keeping your feet planted firmly, kind of where the grass is growing. And I think regarding your circumstances, be able to adapt on the fly. Every job is going to have positives and negatives, and you can complain about the negatives, but it's not going to change where you're at. So if you don't like it, then get out of something, go do something else. If you don't like the hours or you don't like the pay, go do something else. But while you're there, don't ever fault the student athletes for where you're at, because don't fault them because they're not an Auburn or Tennessee 5-star American, that they're NAIA or they're a high school kid. They still want to be pushed and they still have goals. And so your job is to try to help them reach those goals. And when doing that, teaching them, work ethic, being dedicated, discipline, building character, being a polite young woman and young man, helping them become model citizens when they leave. So they take something away. And I think that's really important. I think that's the bigger thing. Your wins and losses, we're all competitive. I get it. But not everybody's going to win championships every year. Some years are down, you have injuries, but just keeping your head up and just trying to do the best you can, because we all fall short. I mean, I make mistakes every day. I made some today already, but it's just doing your best and being grounded and trying to instill those things in these kids. Because right now, Tommy, in this era, these student athletes all over this country, they need that stuff instilled in them, I think.
Yeah, they do. Yes, they do. That's why I call it the greatest profession.
It really is.
Yeah, can't imagine ever doing anything but this. So let's talk about some life, man.
Sure.
First thing, do you know where the name Life came from?
When I tried to research, I do not actually know. I do know it has to do, because if you look at the history of the school, being the number one chiropractic school in the entire world, we're very holistic in our approach. And they preach that from the president down. We're holistic in views. We're holistic in everything that we do. So mind and body and spirit all connected in one's a big, big deal. And so I think life has probably come from that somewhere. I'm not positive, but it's very interesting. It's like no other place I've been. And it's, and from top down, it's really an amazing place.
Yeah. I went on the website and I looked at the courses or the degrees that you can earn. And in addition, to chiropractic, medicine, and liberal arts classes, the classes that they offer in health sciences and athletics and strength and conditioning and all of that, it's really a really neat degree, program for both undergraduate and master's degrees. So they offer a lot there. And,
they really do.
I knew you were working, I knew that you were working at Life, but for some reason I knew you were coaching in college, but for some reason I thought it was Kennesaw State or something, one of the other schools there. And then, so when I started doing the research, I was like, man, I got to talk to Tommy about that. So you have 500 athletes.
Actually 567 as of today. It's going to grow as we get to October, and I'll go on that later. It's going to grow.
Yeah. And it's just you and another assistant, right?
Yes, sir. Brand new
20
assistant.
sports,
She's been here.
560 athletes. Any interns or GAs?
We are getting a work study, and we're getting a couple interns in October and the fall to help out. And I will say the reason it's taken so long, if we look at it, is when I first got hired, they were kind of revamping the strength conditioning program a little bit. And the current weight room that I still use was only about maybe 1,400 square feet. So when you're trying to put 30, maybe 35 in there at a time, I couldn't have one to their body because just no room to move.
Yeah.
So now that we have a little bigger space, we have another new weight room, which I'll get into later, but that's kind of why we're just now kind of getting our feet with work studies and internships, because the opportunities are there, and it's going to be really good once we get that going. Now, Tommy, one thing that's interesting, I don't know if you saw, for our total, population, undergraduate only has 910 students. The postgraduate has about almost 1,900, and that's solely because the chiropractic program is so popular. And that, it's amazing. You usually don't find undergraduate that much smaller than, postgraduate, but it's really amazing.
Hey, did your light just go out?
Oh yeah. There you go. Sorry. You said it's motion censored.
Oh, that's awesome. All right. So that's amazing, man.
Mm-hmm. It really is.
That is amazing. All right. So how do you accommodate for one? Now I want to talk to you about wrestling in particular. But how do you accommodate programming for all of those teams and the size of your weight room and availability? Obviously, you start early in the morning. The students there are probably, probably better students than normal. But how do you accommodate all of that?
So the first thing we have to do is we have to talk to the coaches and look at when their practice schedules are. We have two turf fields, and they have to share with the lacrosse, soccer, and they all have their preferred, practice times. Some like to go morning, some in the middle of the day, and some later in the evening, like club rugby. But we also, within that, we have to look at class schedules, because there's certain classes certain students have to take, and most of the time the 9 to 11 block is always going to be classes, sometimes a lot of 1 to 3s. And so once we look at that, then we can start schedule. Now, for me, I am in the SHS building, which is the Student Health Sciences. That's where the original weight room was. It's this little dungeon. It's 1,400 square feet, maybe. The equipment was donated by the Tennessee Titans before I got there, and we've made some modifications just for space. I've had to move some things around. There's no ventilation, so the doors have to stay open. And what's funny, Tommy, is it's in a class hallway. So we'll be warming the guys up outside, and students are getting ready to go 2 feet around to the class. So like, all right, make way, here come the students. And they just have to part, let the students go in and start warming up. Then if they come out, okay, have to part. And they walk by, look in the weight room. It's hilarious. At first I was like, are we serious here? This weight room's really in a student hallway where classes are 5 feet away. So that took some time to get adjusted to. Now, we just built up by the turf field, they call it the pitch for rugby and soccer, a new athletic center. So we have a new weight room, which is about 3,100 square feet. And so then we have 10 half racks in there, so we can get some work done. We have a training room. We have our offices for some coaches and some locker rooms. So that has helped alleviate some
Yeah, I
of
saw that. That's nice.
Yeah, and so for a small school, it is really, really nice. And so my assistant, Laura, she stays up here the whole time because she inherited the rugby teams, all the court stuff, all the men's rugby, women's rugby, club rugby. She does track a little bit and swimming and diving. She is taking on our two new sports, men's lacrosse in the spring of 24 and women's flag football. And so I have to drive back and forth, because I'll usually some days, like when it's October, I'll be 6 to 12 straight from 6 a.m. to 12 p.m. And the other weight room, I'll come up here for two groups, like 1 and 3 in the afternoon with my other sports. So that took a little bit to get used to make sure I could time it right. So it's pretty much bang, bang. But the key is sitting down and putting a schedule together for all coaches, because some coaches like to train early, some like to train late, and then have them all get together. We have to send some coaches get mad. Well, I want to train it well. Usually then if that's the case, I'm like, Coach, it's first come, first serve. Coaches, I have to do what they say. And this staff is so great, Tom. They're so adaptive that now this is the third year where pretty much all the sports know this is when they're going to train, and they've built their practices around it. So it works well that way.
So you have less than 5,000 square feet of weight room space.
Yes, sir.
Now, I saw a picture of the dungeon, and it still looks like, I guess, there's no fancy graphics on the wall. It's like a dungeon. It's like old school.
It's in a boiler room. There above us is exhaust, where total exhaust goes above with piping. So all my tall basketball players have to move over 6. If you're over 6'5" and you try to snatch, you'll cut your hand on it. So we have to move over and turn the bars around. They're also the Titans gave us wooden platforms attached to these racks. They look like ski slopes, and they were so big, like I couldn't fit around. So I had the maintenance people cut the wood out, and I put the racks around the wall so I could see at least. But it's hilarious. But some people love that vibe because it's dark, it's grungy. But when you get more than 10 people, it is like a hot box, because there's no ventilation in there at all.
That's amazing. All right, so let me cover these sports. You have men's and women's wrestling, and both wrestling programs are a juggernaut.
They are.
They're very good. And NAIA national champs, correct?
Men's were last year, and women's were second or third for 2 years in a row. So we're on the cusp, and it's usually Grandview and Life for men's, and women it's usually one or two other schools, but they both are really, really competitive and strong.
And so Georgia high school wrestling, when I was in high school, was good.
Mm-hmm.
So I would imagine y'all get a lot of kids in state for wrestling. Is that correct?
We get a decent amount for the men's side, but the women, because it's grown. Women, they usually pull from either Texas, California, Oregon, and Florida is where the
Yeah,
hot
Florida.
spots
Yeah,
for women. And of course, men
yeah,
are up north. We'll get them from everywhere. Coach told me
yeah.
he recruits Miami. He recruits up north in Pennsylvania. So we get them pretty much all across the country.
Yeah, Palmetto, when I was in Miami, Palmetto High was really good.
Mm-hmm.
But you got men's and women's lacrosse, men's and women's rugby, and then you have a club rugby. So you have 3 rugby teams.
Mm-hmm.
Men's and women's soccer, men's and women's swim and dive. That team is huge. Men's and women's volleyball, men's and women cross country and track and field, men's and women's basketball, and then you're adding women's flag football, competitive flag football, correct?
And men's lacrosse. We have women's lacrosse now. We're
Yeah,
adding men's lacrosse. Yep.
yeah. And then you have a competitive cheer team, correct?
Yes. Yes.
All right, but now there's no rowing or crew, no
Correct.
baseball, no softball, which I thought was odd,
Mm-hmm.
and of course, no football.
Right. And obviously, since, like I said, earlier we were talking, rugby was the main sport when the school was founded in 74. So that kind of is like, if you would be our football, because they're both really big teams,
Yeah.
both rugby programs. And I just asked one of the coaches today about club. I said, what is the average age? I've never really, I know it's different. He said, we have as young as 21 and as old as 31 that play
Yeah.
club rugby. And
Oh,
most
club.
99% are in the chiropractic program as well.
Yeah. Oh, no kidding.
Yes.
Yeah, you need to be in chiropractic after playing. You're
Sure
31 years
That's
old.
freaking crazy, man. I don't get it.
Yeah. So, looking at the sports, it's very Europeanish,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
with wrestling, rugby, soccer, or swim, dive is huge, volleyball, and all the track and field and cross country.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing, man. Amazing.
I know.
So I know that y'all have a lot of international student athletes.
Sure do.
Has that been a challenge for you?
It has, because, and we also have both soccer coaches are international. So it has been a challenge. The biggest thing when I got hired was basically for all coaches, but, all from the international side, to earn their trust, that, hey, I'm not going to get anybody hurt, trust me to do my job, and we can discuss. And I always discuss and let them do, if you want to see this in there, I'll put it in the program, just please don't micromanage me, let me do my job. We can report and back and meet all the time. But for international students, it was different, because you do have some language barriers, like most of our men's volleyball team is all international. And they'll be from South America to Caribbean to wherever. And there's a few sprinkled in from the States. But so getting them to understand the importance of weight room a lot is the toughest thing. They all run and condition, if you're from Europe, they get that. They're just not big into lifting heavy because, it's going to hurt you, or, it's not what my sport needs. And I'm like, well, don't lift heavy every week. So it's just like I said earlier, pushing the buttons to, to start slow and to see that, hey, how do you feel? You're going to be a little sore after this. You haven't done this before. And Tom, when I say start slow, I mean, it's like working with 9th grade high school kids, because I'm just not going to push them because they've never done anything. When we do cleans, I break it down to just picking up a bar correctly for a couple of weeks, then maybe to a full before we even start worrying about having to catch anything. And when they get comfortable doing those things, they'll say, okay, this feels pretty good. And then they start asking questions, which I love, because I know they're buying in more. And so you just have to temper expectations. I remember, when I left Auburn and went to the high school rank, I remember getting so upset at these kids where I was just like almost dog cussing. I'm like, how terrible are you? Can you please try for once? And this one kid came up, Benno, he's like, Coach, you forget we're not 5-star D1 athletes like Auburn. I had to think like red flashlight bulb moment. I'm like, you're right. You're not. That's my fault. I expect, So same thing here. So it's a challenge from that aspect, but it's really, I like the challenges, because you get to understand different cultures, different systems, different way of doing things. And so they're some of the hardest working women and men we have on campus as well.
Yeah, that's amazing. All right. So what about how does coaching at a NAIA school differ? Like what challenges and constraints do you have there that you didn't have at Oklahoma State or Auburn?
Or even at Lovett, the high school I was at, even
Yeah.
there. I mean, obviously the biggest thing was the number ratio. Okay, from staff to coaches, that's huge because
Yeah.
sometimes I may be at 50-1. With I'm doing men's wrestling, and then you're looking at when I first got hired, I was like, I love my AD, Jamie Pendergast. She's phenomenal. I was like, so Jamie, can you just tell me? I'll write down what our yearly budget is for strength. She's like, yearly budget? I said, no, what, or purchase. She was like, yeah. She was like, we'll fundraise for stuff if you need. I said, what's that? She says, yeah, we'll fundraise. Just let me know in advance so I can earmark it for big purchase or small purchase. So I was like, oh, no
Yeah.
budget.
There
Okay.
is no budget.
So there's no weight room budget. Okay. And
Oh, man.
from not having a budget, and Tommy, like I said, this is a chiropractic school, and you have to understand that they still are I don't want to say king, but they it's very important, that we
Yeah.
do what we do. My first year, I remember getting ready to set up for basketball. I had it all set up at 5:30 for men's and women's. I was using both gyms. I come back, all my cones are thrown around. They're putting chairs and carpet on. I'm like, what are we doing? I go, I got sports. We have to set up for the guest speaker for chiropractic today. I said, what's that? I said, no, I have this reserve. She's like, no, you don't understand. Chiropractic has this reserve. So once a quarter, both gyms have guest speakers, or they have a chiropractic deal or some type of initiative where they have speakers. And so there's times where like I can't even have access to do stuff in the gym. So if it's raining out, I have to go downstairs to a racquetball court and do like warm up in there in agilities. Or if it's not raining, I'll go outside to this little small hill. So that stuff was like, I was used to be so infuriated and frustrated because, I'm used to snapping my fingers, walk out here, walk out there, get that.
Yeah.
A lot of the equipment that we have, I took with me from Lovett and I purchased when I first got here, Tommy. We didn't have enough weights for the first weight room to even put like 315 on a bar. So I went to Play Against Sports. And I knew a guy that worked there, and he cut me a deal I could buy weights for 37 cents a pound. So I loaded up a bunch of 5s, 2s, and 10s. So if you go down there, there's like 4 different weight companies of 10s, 5s, and 2s. The kids are like, looking like, what is this? I said, still the same. It's just look where it's located. It's a different company. Just don't worry about it. So half the weights are mismarked. I have kilos, bumper plates. They know, and I have to tell them what that is. And so those challenges, and like I said, we can go back to the hallway of stretching. There's just a lot of little things that are different. But again, once I learned to adapt and understand, look, take a deep breath. You understand where you're at and just do the best you can. Because you know what, my boss knows, she understands. The coaches know, they understand, and so that has been a challenge in itself, and it still is at times. There'll be times where there'll be conflicts with our field. We do a lot of fundraising for the turf that we got brand new turf, and so a lot of times if I want to do a camp at this, Tommy, these fields are booked with like lacrosse teams. We have like the Atlanta United rugby team was here working out 3 times a week. We have the lacrosse professional team using our stuff. We have professional track teams using our track, but we all do that to help fundraise, to pay for stuff, to raise money. So that I wasn't used to as well, but it was good, Tommy, because, even at the Auburns, the Tennessees, even Oklahoma State, and even Lovett to an extent, money wasn't an object. It's just like, oh, okay, this is how it's supposed to be. But you learn to really what your true grit and worth is. And, our AD says it the best, are you committed? Are you comfortable? And, if you're committed, you're going to find a way. You just will.
Yeah.
And that's what we try to preach. Yeah.
That is exactly right. So funny story. Clay and Aaron and Brady, they grew up in the LSU weight room. That's where they would go when it was raining. They couldn't play outside. Or I remember I got them remote control cars for Christmas one time, and we took them to the indoor. They grew up there.
Sure.
So I don't remember how old they were. Clay was probably 12, Aaron was probably 10 or something, and we because they had never seen we'd ridden through Cookville where I played football, but they had never been around the facilities or anything. So we passed through there on vacation going to Knoxville one year, and we stopped into the university, same secretary that was there when I was there. And I asked her, I said, Miss Peggy, can you let us up in the weight room? She said, absolutely. And she goes, it hasn't changed. And, this is probably 15, 20 years later. Yeah. So we go up in the weight room. So when I was there, so first thing, Clay starts laughing. He goes, Dad, this is your weight room? This is terrible. And, he just kept busting on me because he didn't know any better. So I put some weight on the bar. I put 45s on the bar. I said, come over here, pick this up. What's that weigh? He goes, that's 135 pounds. I said, yeah, pick it up, bench it, So he bench presses it. He goes, that's heavy. I said, yeah, it's just like the ones in Baton Rouge. I mean, there is no difference. 45-pound weight, it doesn't matter if it's covered with a little rust or not. It's still 45 pounds, man. And you just got to get it done.
That's right.
Just got to find a way to get it done. And that's one of the reasons why I thought it would be so good to have you on here, because because it's different, but it's still strength and conditioning. You don't have GPS technology. You don't have velocity-based training tools. You don't have a force plate or a NORD board. Right. But it's still strength and conditioning, and you're able to put a good product on the field, the pitch, the court, the mat, and you're successful. Yeah. And you love it.
I do. And I tell you, we just actually got, it's been a year, we've got some Vitru VBTs. We have 10 now for our new weight room.
Oh, cool.
So we're going to start incorporating that a little bit. And that's one reason my assistant, Laura, she's the same as me because she was at IMG for almost 2 years. So IMG has everything under the sun.
Yeah, elite.
So
they have elite form there. Yes.
Yeah, so she has NORBOARD experience. She has force play experience. She has all kinds of data. So that's the area where I don't have experience in because you're not around it, you don't have it. And so I wanted to learn more, and I'm learning through her. And so that's an exciting time. And so it's not like they don't understand, but you have to put things in perspective of priorities. And I don't know how she does it. I mean, yes, we have some other assistant ADs for external ops and internal, but she wears about 20 hats that, if you type LSU and go athletic director, you'll have like 11 different ADs, and she has it all, so her job is phenomenal. And I'm forever thankful for her giving me the chance and the support that she gives me and my staff. And she always goes out of her way to tell us whenever she says, thank you for everything you do. You're really vital to our success. And she uses this, Tommy, as also like an advisor role, because we have goals of, we want a 3.1 GPA across all sports, not just a little bit, but the whole, all through the quarters. We want to make sure we get 85% graduation retention rate. We have these goals that we want to do. Yeah. And I try to preach it. I try to tell the kids, hey, make good decisions. Let's make sure, we're feeling our system, make sure we're eating correctly. We have this is our second year of having a full on-staff dietitian now. We have a fueling station a couple days a week. So awesome. We're doing things that NAIA schools a lot don't have. So that's a big, lure for these recruits, because they're like, man, these other NAIA schools I've visited don't have anything like this, let alone with the 10 athletic trainers we have, I think, on staff. So it's really amazing of what we have here. And I think Life is starting to do a better job of marketing themselves. In the past, they maybe, everybody's, Life's a chiropractic school. Well, no, it's really not. I joked with Scott Sinclair when he came and spoke at our high school conference I went to with my assistant. He's like, yeah, we have like 400 and some student athletes. Don't you have like 100 more? I said, yeah, we do. He's like, that's amazing. He had the same question. Like, how do you do it? Because if you've never trained more than like one sport and had like all these assistants, it could be a culture shock. But luckily I've been able to, wherever I've been, I've had a lot more on my plate than at times I probably thought I could handle. You just try to find ways. And again, Tommy, it's not going to be perfect. I look a lot of times I'm like, well, I wish I could do this, but because of time I can't. And, I'm sure when we get into it, I'll kind of step in about, philosophy of my training.
So how has your philosophy changed because of the constraints?
The big thing is one thing I think, for our off-season program, normally we'll get 3 days, sometimes 4. Because of that and our time, I'm like, how can I maximize my time the best? And really, I fell in love with Joe Kinn's tier per system. Mm-hmm. I like the total body, lower body, upper body emphasis for that day, but you still hit all of it, but it's just under different states of fatigue and what the importance is. And for us here, now that's how I train my sports. I don't micromanage my assistant Laura. She does some of that, but she does other things because she has this bigger weight room. But for me, I can get the most bang for my buck doing that system, and I see results for the kids. And so, because of that, I really fell in love with it. Now, it doesn't mean if we have a 4-day split, I'll do some of the stuff that, you were doing at Miami, LSU, because I love it. That was my foundation principles were built on, because I know it works. But for me, that's one way I've changed. And also, since we have limited dumbbells and kind of space at times, I usually do supersets or trisets. So if I have 3 or 4 guys or girls to a rack, some person may be squatting, some person may be doing a core, some may be doing a double exercise. So they're going around until all that's done, and we'll do like 2 or 3 exercises at a time. Everything's on a whistle. When they're done, stop, we'll wait, and then we'll start the next group of exercise, because I just don't have the space or time to wait for 4 or 5 people just to squat. And so I always keep the room moving, which has made a big deal.
Yeah, if people are standing around, you're not working.
No, and because of that, we do a lot of offset stuff, offset dumbbell lunge instead of tube, and I like that more. We'll do anti-rotation stuff for core, and I've added a ton of Vernon Griffin stuff. I know you know who he is. He's phenomenal
he does a great job
for hip mobility and shoulders and everything and ankle mobility. So I incorporate all that stuff with my teams. And again, it's micro doses because, again, depending on the time and what the practice was like, what I have to do, sometimes I'll have that laid out, Tommy, but if the coach comes up, coach, I killed their legs. Let's just do upper body or light lower. I said, yes, sir, I can do that. I'm just like, dang, I thought we were going to hit 80% for some fives. I guess not, so I have to swallow that. Like, so, okay, I got it. Or my starters need to not do this. They stretch? I say, because they have a big game tomorrow. Yes, sir. And I'm thinking, I don't remember that game. Oh, no, the game just got put in for tomorrow. I'm like, oh, okay, thank you. So, it's the same stuff you do with before. And before, if I was younger, I probably would have had a conniption fit, like would have melted, like, oh my God, no, this is what we're supposed to do. It's scheduled on the sheet. You see the sheet. This is what we're doing. It can't change, so those things, again, I've take a step back, take a breath. Hey, do the best we can for the time we have. Something that they're working hard is always better than not doing anything.
That's right.
And that's what we have to do. And so it, like I said, it's always a challenge because of the space constraints. I'm like, okay, I can do this. A lot of stuff I do single leg dumbbell, from cleans to snatches to jerks, just with dumbbells, because I can get the space done. And I have added so much more single leg work with all my sports than I ever used to do. One, because of that, but because I think it's so much more important now when we train.
Yeah. And like you said, you can do a lot, contralateral stuff, working the left leg, holding the weights in the right hand. And we did a lot of that. All of our unilateral work, we even did a lot with holding the weights over our head. We saw that really changed the stimulus a lot in the unilateral movements. And so, it's all good stuff, man. And, it's strength and conditioning is really simple, man. Weight, load is load. It doesn't matter where you put it. Doesn't matter what form it comes in. So Aaron is working for a company called F45.
Okay.
And it's group training. He loves it. And, he's always coming home and showing me these new exercises that they do. They have like 96 different circuits that they implement in their training. So he's always coming home with some new device or a new exercise. Like one, he calls them headlock squats. So you hold this big heavy med ball like you're headlocking it, and then you squat with it on and you're holding it in your left arm. And he's talking about how it stresses the core differently, and it's all squatting, man. It's all load. It doesn't matter if it's dumbbells or what. It's the same stuff. It's actually really good that you are changing it up.
And that right there, I'm going to take that. I'm going to use it. I like that. I'm so
you like the headlock squat?
Yeah. So I stole that from you. So another thing I took from you. So
no, we owe that to Aaron and Mark Wahlberg.
There you go.
Because I think Wahlberg owns it or something. But he loves working there. He really does, because it changes every day. Every day is different. So he loves it. All right. So I want to talk to you. I got a couple more questions about life, and then I want to talk a little bit about your time while you were coaching in high school. But what are, because I know y'all are on quarters there. So how does that, I was on quarters when I was at Tennessee Tech. But when I first started coaching in college, we were on semesters, so it was totally different. So how are working on the quarter system different than semesters? Not a lot of people do it that way anymore. So
I only know of 3 other schools maybe that do it besides Life. And of course, the reason we have to do it is if you look at the chiropractic program, they have to go 14 straight quarters, 3.5 years in a row. So if they were on semesters, they'd be here forever. And I think the last time I checked, they have to take 344 credit hours. So it's amazing. So that's the real reason we're on it. At least we're talking about flirting with semester for just undergrad, but obviously the postgraduate has to still be quarters. But the biggest difference and the toughest thing is when it comes to fall. See, right now we're in our summer quarter. Our fall quarter, when I'll be my busiest, really busy, won't start till October 1st. So the problem is, I already have my women's volleyball. They're in season. My women's and men's soccer in season. My women's and men's basketball are getting ready to start their preseason. So the coaches try to alleviate to where they can go home some, because if not, they'll get so burnt out because their season, we'll get 6 weeks of preseason in with those basketball teams. And then bam, they're practicing, they play games. Like volleyball, I had a 3-week preseason. They had a scrimmage. They play their first full tournament next Friday. So it's tough because the quarter system, that's one reason we got Team Builder, because we can send workouts home with all the kids that are overseas with the videos of the running we want, the exercises, and they can sign in. I can check the completion report to make sure that they're doing it now. Hopefully they're doing, what I want, but if they're just doing it's better than nothing. And that's been tough to try to get enough of the preseason in that I would like. We normally don't. Off season's a little bit better, but the summer is not like a semester program. It's not like you're crushing it May through July. It's just not like that, So we have to maximize what we can, and that's been the toughest deal with especially the fall teams, because they just turn around and play competition right away, and you can't rush strength. You can try to, but your body's going to adapt to the stimulus as it adapts to it, its rate. So that's been a real experience that I wasn't used to. That I'm finally now in going to my 6th year, I understand it better, but still not ideal. And the coaches know that. They know it's tough.
Yeah. I love Team Builder. That's, I have a few things looking back that I wish I would have done. And Team Builder is one of them. I don't know.
Did you do at LSU? Did you still do sheets like Excel sheets to print or post like binders for your athletes, or how did you all do yours?
Yeah, we had like 48 monitors in the weight room, and then we had 12 channels that we could send out. We had 12 different feeds to over almost 50 monitors. And then we had these 2 gigantic ones that were over 100 inches on one end of the weight room. So the workout and all the videos of the workouts and stuff like that was broadcast throughout the entire weight room. And then our coaching staff had cheat sheets. Okay. So if I trained the defensive line, then we called them cheat sheets, but it was an Excel document, and it had every player on the defensive line and all of their weights for every exercise that they would do that day. Now we used Perch, so their loads were all saved in the cloud. Before that, we used Tendo, and we hand jammed it. So the coach would write down all the stuff that they did, and then some poor intern and assistant coach would spend an hour after the workout. I would go look over their shoulder, and they would say, "Coach, now's not a good time." But we didn't have Team Builder, man. We experimented with a couple of different brands, during COVID. But man, Team Builder we use that now with the Moffitt method, and it's amazing.
Yeah, it is awesome.
Yeah. And just the software alone, the benefits that you get with the leaderboards and the team feeds and the coaches feeds and maxes and all of that, and the way the players and your athletes are engaged in it and you can put your videos in it.
Yep.
The price for that right there is worth the subscription that you pay for it without even using
Oh yeah,
your programming.
exactly. Without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah. I mean, it drives, it's, we talk about intent and driving and buy-in and all of that. They have their strength and conditioning program in the palm of their hand. And you can sit and make your own leaderboards, and you can compare yourself to everyone. And you have the feed, which is, it's like Twitter, every time I know this, okay. When I was a player, now we didn't even have computers. We had
Right.
our floppy disks were the size of a laptop.
That's right.
Is now. The floppy disks that we used were this big when I was in college. But I know this: if I would have been sitting in a class and I looked up and I saw that the starting left tackle benched this, and I'm sitting in class, I'm sneaking out of class and going to do bench. Because you can see when it broadcasts the live feed every time you hit a PR.
Yeah, it sure does.
Yeah, as soon as you enter it, it says Tommy Moffitt hit a PR and bench, and it's amazing. So that's why I love Team Builder. I love it.
And Hewitt, Tom, I'll give a shout out to him. He's been so helpful with this because now we've integrated with Vitruve when we start doing it now because they have a lot of things they can integrate and he's
all your
awesome.
wearables, integrate with it. Yeah.
So he's done a phenomenal job. He's really smart as well. Because we talked the other day, actually yesterday, he was a Division III athlete. And we talked about differences of strength conditioning from here to there and what he's seen. So it's another tool in the shed. And, I know I've talked to a few strength coaches that, like the local one here that, Joe Kin was there and other great speakers, Landlow from the Broncos. And, they asked about VBT. And I said, we're just kind of starting on. I said, it's newbies. I said, I like velocity-based training. I don't think I would hang my hat to make it end all be all, but I think it's another tool in your shed because I like the fact I want it for competition and I want it till we can look at loads for volume if where there's some overtraining at all. That's really what I like because as well as I do, I may say 80% for 5. Well, this kid may only give me 70 because that's all he's got in the tank today.
That's all he's got. That's right.
And this kid may be 90%, so I can jack his weight up a little higher. So that's really what I'm interested in doing. It's just again with our sizes of our teams in there, it's tough. Because it's going to take time to learn, so we're fiddling around with it. But again, it's exciting because the kids are always on their phones. And I wish, we don't have the iPads on our racks, to put the stuff in for the team builders. So they have to use their phones. So we have to be real careful to make sure that, I'm like, hey, if I see anything but the team builder on your phone or you're texting, I said, we're all going to pay for it at the end. So it's trying to get them to be, again, like you said, careful, paying attention.
Yeah, that's a concern.
Yeah.
So a little bit, and I don't know if you know Travis Mash, but he's right there in Atlanta.
Okay.
And he is really good with velocity-based training, like some of the stuff that he's done on YouTube, and his Summer Strong talk that he gave was phenomenal. And I really like the way he breaks it down.
Mm-hmm.
He speaks more of our language and does a great job of breaking it down. So I really like Travis Mash. So y'all should try to go watch them.
We'll go watch them. That's a good idea.
They're not far. They're not far from you. All right. So can you talk a little bit about Lovett and your time there and your time? The other was Meadowcreek.
Meadowcreek, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Talk a little bit about your time there and compare and contrast a little bit, coaching at Power 5 schools and then being a high school strength coach and now working at an NAIA school. Can you talk about that a little bit? Yeah.
And I'll, for those that probably are, there's people going to wonder, well, geez, he was at Auburn, Tennessee, why did he go? So I'll just preface by saying, I got married early, went through a divorce. Ashton was, Ashton, she was young. So I wanted to stay close to her. Yeah. And so that's what made me leave Auburn. And my mom and stepdad were in Atlanta. So I was like, okay, I can still be close, but, still far enough away that, that I can have my distance. So that's how I got into high school. Yeah. And at the time I was just sending stuff out through private high schools, public high schools, see if there was a bite. And George Pugh, who's like a father figure to me, hilarious. He's coached at all kinds of D1 schools, was the head football coach there. And he called me, said, I got your resume. And he said, why don't you come on down, I'd like to interview. And I interviewed, and he showed me the weight room, which is much like our dungeon here. There was maybe 1,000 square feet. And, kids at Meadowcreek, when I went in there, the football team was lifting in jeans and flip-flops, no shirts, do-rags on and full earrings and chains. I was like, okay. He's like, what do you think? I said, well, there's going to be some rule changes. We'll go over that later. I said, but then they're squatting with 400 pounds about a half an inch down. So we've got to learn about that. So that was a good, was kind of a good change, because at the same time at Meadowcreek, I also worked with Cedar Grove High School to incorporate their summer for Ray Bonner. So he was at Middle Tennessee State. He's a good friend of Coach Pugh. So that was really an experience in that Meadowcreek had really never had a high school strength coach. I was brought in to try to help instill discipline for every sport. And again, no budget. The principal told me, hey, you're also going to be an SRO officer. Basically, if there's fights that break out, I need you to help in there, break it up and stuff like that. I was like, okay, yes, ma'am. So that was a different experience because, again, it was, now that they were 6A, now it's 7A, and they had probably 3,500 students, massive school. So then they're also ESOL, which means English speaking other language, the largest high school in the state that speaks other languages. So I was introduced to that barrier a little bit as well from all walks of life for the different sports. So that was good too. But one thing I really learned from Coach Pugh was what he tried to do was instill pride. Because at that time, Meadowcreek, I think, had been maybe won one game in like 3 years or 4 years. I think we beat one team our second year, and you thought we won the Super Bowl. But what he tried to do was have the kids learn, when we traveled out down South Georgia, all our games were against big schools. We got murdered 70-0, 82-0. Kids were teams were playing their freshman team, beating our varsity. But he did it to raise money so we could have the same color uniform, the same color shoes. He believed in looking your best, being your best, and that the kids learned how to dress up when you go away, learned what manners are, discipline. So really, it was a phase of them that they didn't have, because Tommy, probably, I would say at least half of those kids of all sports, men and women, came from broken homes. They didn't have two parents, or they were raising themselves, with an aunt that lived down the road, So it was really, we were like father or parent figures. And I really fell in love with those kids there. And honestly, with the staff we had that Coach Pugh brought from college, we had Vincent Brown, who played for the Patriots now. He's coached D1 for last 15 years as coordinator's linebacker coach. We had other coaches that were at Alabama. Coach Pugh played on staff, so we had a great staff brought in, and it would have took a school like Lovett to call to get me out of there. That was again by chance, so it was great. And then going to Lovett was the extreme polar opposite, right? Because we're going from public inner city to private. So you're going from no money to a lot of money.
Yeah.
Coach Muschamp, Will Muschamp was the head coach at that time. He was at Auburn's DC with Yox, and Mike Muschamp, his brother's head football coach at Lovett, still is a great guy.
Mike is still the head coach at
still
Lovett?
There. He's been there for over 20-some. Yeah, he's still there.
He's a great dude, man.
He's hilarious. And
I like him better than I like his brother, for sure. So
yeah.
I like him a lot better than him.
Yeah, you have experience with Will too. So
good people, man.
He wanted a strength coach with college experience at Lovett.
Yeah.
So he happened to call Will. We'll talk to Yox. Yox said, you interested? I said, I'll give it a look. And so I got hired there, and I was floored because it was like a mini Auburn or LSU. I was like, man, my budget was $11,000 for the weight room. We built a brand new weight room, was 8,500 square feet with a track, endless supplies for med balls, bands, anything I wanted, I could snap my fingers. I was training wealthy parents' kids for extra money on the side. I was getting gift cards in the mail. I mean, like, what's this from? When we did good in football, we got bonuses, like a high college. I'm like, what's this? So it was a different deal, but also on the same spectrum, same thing. Kids are kids, Tommy. And so a lot of times these kids had a little privilege to them, right? And so we had to kind of break that trend and bring them down to understand, hey, let's be thankful for what we have. Let's look and take big pictures. So that's the only time I've won a state championship in football was 2012-13 season, and it was phenomenal. Muschamp is always going to outcoach people. I mean, he's unreal. He's like his brother Will, smart as can be. But we were athletically not near as good as the teams we were playing, especially at that time. The other private schools, the Woodwards, the Blessed Trinities, and now they've changed regions. So he maximized what we had. We had a couple good football players. One playing for the Rams, and I was a D-back. Grant Haley played All-American at Penn State, running back. So we had just enough pieces to to kind of shock the community and win the state. And so that was a phenomenal experience to be part of. And I was so ever thankful for that and for his leadership and how he ran his program and like a college. And, we had pregame meals and everything was organized. So it was a different spectrum. But, when I look back at it, all those experiences come down to one thing. Kids are kids. They all need love. They need support. And, they're going to go as far as you let them know with boundaries. And I think once you set the boundaries, they won't cross them. They're going to test like your own kids test them. They're going to test boundaries all the time. And I look back, I'm like, Tommy, I just had a kid from Meadowcreek. He's 32, came up and saw me last Wednesday, Johnny Neighbors. And he went and played at Union College in Kentucky. He broke all the records there. He's now trying to do masters track and field. The kid's phenomenal.
Oh, wow.
And he came up, Coach, I want to see you. I looked you up. I said, John, you look the freaking same. You're still jacked. He's like, it's all to you. He said, you taught me how to lift correctly and heavy, and I'll never forget those lessons. And, as you know, when you hear kids say that, that's more than anything else. That means the world. That means you made a positive impact in their life, not a negative one. And if I can do that, then I've done my job. And, whether you're making $1 million a year, you're making $10,000 a year, those things you can't put a price tag on.
That's right.
You really can't.
That's right. That's why it's the greatest profession. All right. Let's talk wrestling, man.
Mm-hmm.
I got two more questions. One, tell me about those wrestlers because they are good. You don't win I don't care what level you're competing at. You don't win a national championship unless you're doing something right. And so talk about the wrestling program and training collegiate wrestlers.
It's a blast here because, like I said, I've never trained women before since I got here wrestling. So that's a whole different entity of just those women are machines. They are jacked. They love to eat steel. Like they're in here right now. And as I told them before I did the podcast, hey, I know you're doing your circuits, and they didn't have to be here. I said, just, can you just not blare the music to where my ears bleed so I can, do this podcast? And there's men in here too, getting after, just throwing, they're jackhammering tire. I mean, they do all this stuff, but I tell you, Tommy, the biggest thing for me is they're the easiest ones. They really don't have to be motivated. Yeah. They know the task at hand. They know, it's an individual, it's a team sport, but it's really individual. It's, it's an individual.
It's individual, man.
And they know they have to get better and they have to outwork or they're going to get pinned or they're going to lose because just the simplest mistakes. And Coach Omi, he was a two-time, I think, national champion at Grandview, which is elite in NAIA wrestling. Yeah. And so he comes from a tough background. And he just instills that he's no play, no nonsense. And the Ashley Flavin and Christian Flavin, women's side, they don't play either. They get after. They all have wrestling backgrounds, and so the wrestlers just go to work, man. They go to work, and it's phenomenal. And one thing with the women, Tommy, it's amazing. It's like that women wrestlers are going to be able to bench the house. They're going to be your strongest because they're so strong with body, their backs, shoulders, and everything. They can really press weight. I'm like, golly, you're strongest for pound. I mean. You look at them, my 101s and 109 women are just like, they're squatting 185, close to 200 pounds. It's amazing pound for pound. They're like your best football players, your linebackers, your skill guys. Yeah. It's a fun deal. The one thing I have to be careful is they do get, remember wrestling in practice, you're getting thrown down or you're throwing down. So you're always getting landed on, you're getting beat up. So I just have to make sure my volume is lower. I still try to crank the intensity when I can, but I won't go over 3s and 2s on any explosive lifts. I very rarely go over 5s or 4s on our squatting pressing just because I don't want to overvolume because they're getting a lot of movement in their stuff they're doing in practice. So I got to try to get my bang for my buck. And with them, I try to keep the workouts at 45 minutes. Maybe I won't go a full, and then most of the time when I say hours with warm up and stuff and, changing groups, I try to get them in and out because I know, our men, I think, go late this year. They're going to be practicing from 5 to probably 7:38 at night by the time they do homework and stuff and eat. And their lift times when we get out, it's going to be 10 a.m. So I always take that in consideration too. Have you eaten something? So again, like we talked about earlier, my difference is before it's like, whatever, let's go. That's your life. Deal with that. So you chose a sport. Let's work. Now it's like, okay, let's think. Have they eaten? Let me look at the workout today. So it's been a great experience, and they're just fun to work with. They really are.
It's an amazing sport, and when you're out there by yourself, when you wrestle, all the other sports that you play, team sports, are easy because it's just you and that guy, or you and that that other lady. And so,
And the stances aren't natural. You're in those low positions where you're shooting all the time. I'm like, golly, I would die trying to do that for 3 minutes.
yeah, it's hell. Tough sport, man. Tough people.
Yeah, and remember John Smith at Oklahoma State in his heyday, he would come in the wear him all the time, and he would always use me as a guinea pig. All of a sudden, I'd be like looking at my left shoulder, I'm like, John, what are you doing? He's like, Stucky, be careful, watch your back. I'm like, John, all right, can you give a guy a warning? I haven't stretched it. He's like, you got to be prepared. You got to be prepared. I'm like, yes, sir.
Yeah. So he did a camp in New Orleans, and I took my team to it, and he took everyone in the camp down.
Yes.
He was famous for like a low leg single leg takedown. He was famous for it. And he took everyone in the camp. There were probably 50, 60 kids. And he took every one of them down. And there was nothing that they could do about it. So he was a beast.
And I'll tell you real quick, one funny story about him and Coach Austin. Now, Coach Austin is strongest. I mean, he's so strong. I mean, I've seen the man do weight. And I remember John coming in, they were talking. He's like, Coach, I can pin you. And Dan's like, no, John, you probably can't. You're 140 pounds soaking wet. I can do whatever I can bench press you, shoulder press you, throw you, whatever. John's like, that's different, Dan, because I promise you, I'll pin you in less than 5 seconds. And the wrestlers are talking smack. Oh, the football player's like, get it, Coach Austin, get it. And Dan's like, what do you think? I said, honestly, I don't know if I'd mess with him, Coach. Him and Pat and the brothers there and all these, like, Coach, you know how strong I am, though, right? I go, have you any wrestling background? He's like, no. I said, then I definitely wouldn't do it. I definitely wouldn't do it. And John's like, Dan, look, I'll even be on top. You can be on bottom. Make it easy for you. And we went down there. Both teams were ripping. I mean, they were just high as loud in the wrestling room. And John's like, on the whistle, are you ready? I'll let you make the first move. Dan made a move, and John had him pinned. So Dan's like, tap it out, like, yep, you got it. And he put it in someone. And Dan's like, dude, that's unreal. So, it's just different. They use your leverage and strength against you if you don't know what you're doing. It's amazing. Yeah. It really is.
I had an intern. I'm not going to call out the assistant coach, but I had an assistant coach that he could probably clean on a good day, probably 374 pounds or more. Well, he wasn't a big guy. And I think he had wrestled some in high school too. But he was probably around 210, 215, probably 200 pounds, 210 pounds. I had an intern that wrestled in college. And he was really good. His dad only lost one match in high school. This kid was a 3-time state, because I knew his dad. I'd coached his dad. But this kid had won 3 state championships and wrestled at UT Chattanooga. And he was doing an internship for us. And he was probably 138 pounds. And my assistant coach was jawing with him. And they went over there. He went and grabbed the guy and tied him up. And that intern of mine had him on his back and choking him out in like 5 seconds. So, you don't want to screw with one of those guys.
No.
All right. Other than don't wrestle a collegiate wrestler, do you have any advice for young coaches?
I think for young coaches, and I look back with today's, social media, everything. I mean, you can go on there and you can see coaches do this, do that. And I think if you can get overwhelmed easy of like, what should I do? Because there's all different philosophies from HIIT training to this you can do all kinds of things. The thing is, I think you need to stick with what you know. And it's okay, like we discussed, to keep it the KISS method, keep it simple, right? And I think when you stay grounded in your beliefs, deal with that. And it's okay to make changes, and that's great, but just make sure you're not changing just to change. Make sure you always have a reason to change. I think that's really, really important. I think it's important that you have to love the field of strength conditioning, like you said. I think people may get into it, not understanding the full intent, especially if you work with football, because it's just a grind, because especially camp and the responsibilities, it's not going to be, you're not going to be home. You can't sometimes tell your wife or your fiance, your girlfriend, when are you going to be home for dinner? No, I'm not going to be home for dinner. When are you going to be home? I don't know. well, that's not good enough. Well, it's going to have to, because I really don't know. There's just different hours that come to it. It's very rewarding, but be grounded, be where your feet are. Have empathy with your student athletes, put them in their shoes, especially now, because there's a lot of things that they're facing that me and you didn't face when we were playing, going through stuff, going as young strength coaches. It's just different. And I think always do your best and don't be afraid to ask questions. I think a lot of times, we get embarrassed or we feel like we're not smart enough to ask questions. And like I said, I make mistakes every day. And I ask Laura, my assistant, she is phenomenal, from all my assistants, from Tracy to Mark to Rob to, everybody, to Kenny that might love it. I always ask questions because I don't want to think, well, he's the head guy, he just knows. No, I don't know it all. That's why I'm using you as an assistant, because I don't know it all. What do you think about this? And I think that's really, really important. And the last piece of advice would be is don't necessarily expect to be, make millions of dollars, because that's, you would see the top, 50 strength coaches do. A lot of people are successful and do it, but if you still look at the average pay for strength coaches across the board, it's still relatively low to other professions for the hours you put in. So know that going into it, and just, you're going to have to enjoy things. Because Coach Cole told me that. He's like, Tommy, if you expect to be rich, it's not going to happen. It's just not. I was like, okay, sure, Coach Cole. Yeah. To myself, right, sure. But, it isn't, and like I discussed with Jason Lascaux, I forgot to mention him. He is a genius in the field as well. Good friend of mine. He's with Washington State. He followed me at Auburn, was with the Bears for 4 years. Really, really smart guy. And, he said one thing he respected about me is he goes, you really didn't chase the money when you could have. And, if I would have stayed at Auburn through my divorce, I would have had a better job and could have maybe been in someplace different. But, Tommy, I wouldn't have known Ashton. I would have not, She would not have a father. And I told myself, regardless of situations, she's 24, she graduated with a nursing degree. I just went up to graduation up at East Tennessee State in May. And if I wouldn't have done what I did, then I could have kissed that stuff goodbye. And I'm never going to sacrifice that for money. I'm just not. And
Amen.
And Jason said, I respect you for that. He goes, you could be where I'm at. He goes, mine's just a luck of draw, who I knew and just happened to fall. And I said, I understand. And at times there was frustration, but at this year's conference, Tommy, the CSCCA one in Orlando, Coach Cole always hosts a little morning prayer session with strength coach, whoever wants to come at 6:15 for 40 minutes. And the majority of those coaches are younger or close to not quite my age for NAIA strength coaches. And we talked about the profession. Some were frustrated, Coach Cole's son included. He's at a small school. And it was good to share, kind of inside of what they saw, what I see, and to understand that, the hours we put in, and maybe we aren't getting the gratification we think we deserve or whatever it is. But it was good to be around that, because sometimes me, you, everybody kind of needs to know there's other people right now just like me at all these other NAIA schools, at these high schools, wherever, small colleges, D2, D3, that are in the same circumstances. And to lean on one another, and I need to do a better job of reaching out to some of those fellow NAIA strength coaches so we can maybe form something to talk. Because there's a young man at Ottawa now who was, I think, at Central Oklahoma. Correct me if I'm wrong. He's now at Ottawa in Kansas. And we talked a little bit about that jump and how was that for him. So it's, build relationships, try to go seek knowledge, because it's ever changing. But again, doesn't mean you have to utilize it all. There's some things you may not like that are out there brand new, shiny, and that's okay. You don't have to use it,
That's right.
So I think, that's what Sinclair alluded to a little bit and doing his talk. We use a little bit of stuff, but he's like, my staff's smarter than I do. And there's all kinds of bells and whistles we have, but it's not the mainstay of our program, So I think, be grounded and find things that that you can do. And then you'll get better as you become more in the field. You'll be more seasoned. You can then start to add more things. But variety is the spice of life to an extent. But, if I'm young, I'm going to try to stick to my core principles and values, and just, I know that works. And then I can kind of build from there.
Yeah. I appreciate that. That was well said, man. Well said. Came from the heart, and I appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Great podcast, man. I really appreciate you coming on here. I really do.
Oh, I'm blessed that you thought of me. I was like, man, I get to be with Coach Moffitt, and you don't give yourself enough credit, and the difference you made in me as far as a strength coach from your knowledge base of the stuff I learned. Because Tommy, I remember we were going somewhere, and you had a Russian Soviet review journal open, and you'd like your speed read. I was like, I go, what page? I remember asking you, like page 286. I go, there's like 500 pages. I'll get it done by the week. I was like, okay, so I really know nothing now. I'm like, this guy's transcribing this stuff. And I looked at like Vershansky stuff. I'm like, man, I'm missing the boat. But you really have made a difference, and what you've done for strength conditioning. Just like John, I was blessed to be around like I said, it's all the best mentors you can think of, from you, Yox, and Dan, and it's just a blessing. So you've made a huge difference in my career. And the thing I always respect about you is you always made time. Like I could be at Podunk University or not even be in the field and call and say, hey, what are you doing today? And you would never hide anything. Tommy, pretty simple. This is what we're doing for our summer stuff. And it may not be to the T, but pretty much close. And it hadn't changed a lot from Miami to Tennessee. And then you made different changes to LSU, So I always appreciate you that, because you always took time out and like, hey, no problem. I have nothing to hide. And not everybody's like that. So that's very awesome on your part.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I learned from the best, man. And, I just feel like it's important that you just pass it on. And
yes, sir.
There was so many people that were so kind to me when I was young, and I've told the stories a bunch, but guys like Coach Johnny Parker and Al Miller, Coach Stucky, and Coach Paul Mary, and it goes on and on and on and on. Coach Hatch, Coach JT Curtis, my string coach, and so the thing that I had to come to grips with more, and I've said this so many times on the podcast, but I can't ever say it enough. I love this profession. I love this profession, and it's, and I told this story. I don't know if it was, because I get, I've been hit in the head a few times and I get the episodes mixed up. No, I was listening to a podcast. Somebody called me out of the blue yesterday, and they left a message on my phone, and I was like, how does I know this person? So I looked, and I'd done a podcast for him. Mm-hmm. And so, he's writing a book now, and he wanted a couple of comments from me for his book. So I went back and listened to the podcast, and I told a story about Coach Stucky. Okay. And so Vince Lombardi, there's a quote, you hear it all the time: winning isn't a sometimes thing, it's an all the time thing. And I thought that I worked with Coach JT Curtis, the winningest coach in all of football. And I had some great coaches, growing up, and I thought I knew what that cliche or that quote meant until I worked for your uncle. And he never left the job at work. He never did. He was thinking about those players, those individual players, 24 hours a day, 365 days out of the year. And I've told this story. When I went when Clay was born, Jill, the night, I was there at the hospital and all, mm-hmm. Coach Stucky let me go there. And then I had to go to work the next day. And then after work, I went to the hospital to see Jill and Clay. And she goes, we're going home tomorrow. Are you going to be able to come get me? I said, yeah. So the next day I told Coach Stucky, I said, Coach, I've got to go pick up Jill and Clay. And he looked at me puzzled, and he looked at his watch like this and said, when are you going to be back? All right. And that's a bit excessive. Okay. Right. But I would rather have had a mentor like that than someone who didn't care.
100% agree.
And winning was, it was 24 hours a day. And so, that's all I'm trying to do, man. I'm just trying to pass it on. And so I appreciate that, because I wouldn't be where I'm at today had it not been for your uncle and all of the men before him and after him. I have so much gratitude because he gave me my first job in college, and it changed my life. And so I will forever be indebted. And in fact, if you talk to Miss Jeannie or Philip, mm-hmm. tell them I said hello.
I will, most definitely. Definitely will.
And please tell your family hello.
Yes, do you do the same?
And good luck. And keep grinding, brother. And if there's ever anything I can do, don't hesitate to ask. Okay.
Most definitely, Coach. I really appreciate your time. This has been a blast. It's been awesome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
So please remember to subscribe and share this podcast. This was a great one, man. And share it with your friends. There's nothing better to sit down with an old friend and coworker and be able to talk training. For more information about the Moffitt Method program and everything that we have to offer, please visit our website, themoffittmethod.fit, or email us at info@themoffittmethod.fit. Thank you for joining us today, and we will see you again next week. Bye-bye.